Hello again. I'd like to start a new series of messages on verses or passages of scriptures that many Christians, maybe even most of Christendom, has gotten wrong. I call this series Misunderstood Texts of the Bible, which I have conveniently borrowed from a book by Sir Robert Anderson of the same name. And the first misunderstood text that I would like to start with is Philippians chapter 4, verse 13, which says, I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. Wow, what a verse. Here it seems to be saying that God will make anything I do happen, right? Sounds like that, right? So many Christians take this verse as a promise that God will make it so that you can accomplish anything you set your mind to and succeed. And there's nothing they could not do, and that this ensures victory or success. And if for some reason it doesn't come to pass, well, it's probably because you sinned or you didn't have enough faith. Unfortunately, what happens is that this verse is taken out of context. As a wise man once said, a text without a context is a pretext. So instead of pulling this verse out of its context and making it mean whatever we think it means or sounds like it means, let's look at the context where it sits and understand exactly what Paul is saying. Oh, and then we'll take a deeper dive into that verse and translate a few Greek words in a little more depth of meaning. But first, let's set the stage for what's happening with the Apostle Paul and why he wrote this letter in the first place. Paul writes this letter from prison in Rome, where he's chained to the leg of a Praetorian guard. Those guards wore the Green Berets, the Navy SEALs, the SEAL Team 6 members of the Roman army of their day. They were responsible for guarding both the emperor and the most dangerous prisoners that came their way. Paul had been arrested in Jerusalem for causing a ruckus, and at that time he appealed his defense to Caesar, which, being a Roman citizen, Paul had every right to do. So off he sent to Rome to appeal his case before the lunatic emperor Nero. Nero, who, to put it mildly, is no friend of Christians. So the situation looks bleak, and the Philippian saints who love Paul dearly are worried. So they take up an offering and send it to Paul. Now, Paul, having received this act of love from the church which he founded, writes to them both to thank them and to let him know how he's holding up under the circumstances. So let's read the context, starting back in verse 10 to see what Paul is talking about. Paul writes, I rejoiced in the Lord greatly. See, he's thanking the Lord for what has just happened. That now at the last moments maybe of Paul's life, your care of me hath flourished again, wherein ye were also careful, but lacked opportunity. Obviously, there was another opportunity or another desire on the part of the Philippians to help Paul out, but they couldn't. So Paul thanks God for the Philippians and what they gave to him. But look at what he says next. Not that I speak in respect of want. What? You're chained to a Roman soldier in prison and you're not in want? Paul says, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. In other words, I'm not crying the poor mouth because I've learned something. I have learned this, whatever state I am, therewith to be content. The word content means to be self-sufficient, to be self-reliant. Now, he's not saying he doesn't rely on God, but he's not reliant on any man. Paul goes on to say, I know both how to be abased or humbled, or to be brought low, or to be totally without anything. And I know how to abound, to have excess, to have more than enough. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed. That word instructed is the Greek word muio, which means I have learned the secret. Paul's learned the secret of how to be content in the best of times. Obviously, it's pretty easy to do that. And in the worst of times. Remember this, for this is the key to verse 13. I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. So Paul says, both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need, I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. Now for the deep cut of that verse. The word can do is the Greek word which simply means I have the strength to do something. All things means everything. All kinds of things, whatever comes my way. Through Christ, he's the one who's giving him the strength in all situations. Now, the earlier Greek texts just have the word the one who strengthens me, and later texts have the word Christ, but it's the same person, it's the same meaning. It's Christ who strengthens him. And the word strengthening is the Greek word endynamou, which is where we get our word dynamite from. It means to be empowered, to give strength, to make me strong. So literally, Paul is saying, I have the strength for everything in the one, Christ, empowering me. That's the literal translation. The thought for thought translation goes like this. I have the strength to go through everything that comes my way through the one that is the Lord Jesus Christ, who gives me the strength to do so. So, the literal translation or the thought translation, you have the same meaning. This is the secret Paul learned. The secret Paul learned about how to be content in every situation, good or bad, is that Christ gives him the strength to endure. That's what Paul is talking about here. Trust that God will see you through. That's strength in and of itself, is it not? Interestingly enough, right after this, Paul says, notwithstanding ye have done well that ye did communicate with my affliction. The word communicate means to give this offering. In other words, in spite of what I just said, thanks for the gift that you sent. Now that's the meaning of Philippians 4:13, that Paul is strong or has the strength for everything that comes his way because Christ gives him the strength to do so. Now you know the meaning of Philippians 4:13. Now this should no longer be a misunderstood text of the Bible.